It is 6 o'clock right on the dot, and we are here finally in the month of May. Welcome, everybody. This is our May welcome gathering. It's been a long Monday, so I apologize. I hope everyone is doing well. Hope if you were caught up in the rain recently, you were able to stay dry. The areas, hopefully, you've been able to stay comfortable and nice. It's been this is the beginning of a long month for WFP. If you are not aware, we are kicking off our campaign camp. So though officially started last Saturday on May the 4th, and we are running all the way through June. Also, at the end of this month, we have our first ever WFP convention. It's still not too late to sign up if you want to, and if you're in the Bay Area, you can always just show up to the kickoff that we have. I'll be sharing all the additional information as we get closer to it at the end of this event. But welcome everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. As always, I like to go over a couple of the community agreements for this evening. The first being, again, if you are new to this space, take up some space. It's always great to hear from folks who are new here, folks who maybe this is their first WFP event, maybe the first California WFP event. Take it up. Fantastic. I love it. Normally this is a smaller group of folks, so most folks don't take up a lot of space, but if you see yourself as someone who's always chatting in these spaces, maybe just make some space for others. But I do encourage folks to be able to engage and talk with one another. What happens here stays here. What is learned here leaves here. This, I think, is always a great thing. What happens here is in terms of like interactions with one another, learning from one another, sharing our own experiences. Let's keep all of that here and then take with us the stuff that we actually learn. Things around WFP, things around policy, anything like that. All of those things are here so that you can take them with you in other spaces. And last but not least, and I think this is probably the most important, speak from your own experience using I statements. So instead of saying, oh, everyone who likes chocolate is terrible, you can say, oh, I think everyone who likes chocolate is terrible. Obviously, that's a controversial statement, but it's that same idea of like, you bring your own perspective to these things. Obviously, there are things that are non-negotiable, so be mindful of that. But in terms of sharing our own experiences of stuff, I think it is really important to bring about what we know and the things that we've lived and experienced as we talk about them. So I hope everyone is fine with these community agreements. If you are able to, I always encourage folks to say hi in the chat. I don't remember if I switched it off of subscriber mode or not. I hope I did, but if not, all you have to do is subscribe to the page. Frida, you were on it right there. Thank you. And you can say hi, where you're from, pronouns, what you're excited about, or if you just wanted to subscribe just so you can chat at another time, that's totally cool too. It is on sub mode. Damn it. Okay, well, let me see if I can change that. YouTube doesn't make this stuff easy to change in the midst of live streaming. But lesson learned for next time. With that, again, folks can say hi at any point this evening. You don't just have to do it now. Going forward, I always like to talk and ground us first and foremost on why we exist as a political party. People have different views of political party. I think a lot of folks think of it in a very typical sense. Oh, Democratic Party, Republican Party, and then maybe some of the other existing parties. We in California are not on the ballot. In other states like New York, for example, they have different rules for how third parties can interact with stuff. So they are on the ballot and they have something called fusion voting. But essentially, what we define as a party is a little more less rigid in how we define what a political party is for all of us. And what really is the cohesive glue around what makes us a political party is the North Star. And this North Star is this here. It's to build a multiracial feminist working people's political party of the American left that wins governing power to enact a structural reform agenda to save the planet and all the people on it. There's a lot going on here in this statement, but this is what really grounds us in how we want to, what we are building toward, who we building toward with, and what is the goal. And there are a lot of things here, and I really want to make sure that I emphasize the stuff highlighted in that reddish orange color. Being, we specifically are intentionally are focusing on the multiracial feminist working people's political party. It's not enough to be like, oh, we just want working class people. Working class people have a bunch of different ideologies. Working class people in some eyes are like, oh, this is predominantly a white thing. We wanted to be explicit in multiracial. So this is encompassing of everybody in the states that's working class. And then also feminist. We know the systems in which patriarchy exists, especially in the current system. So being intentional about who we want to bring into this space and who we want to build with is important for us. The last piece I think is pretty self-explanatory in terms of like saving the planet and all the people on it. I think everyone is okay and great with that understanding. There's nothing too controversial about that for us here in this space. The one thing I do want to emphasize, though, is the governing power piece. In the left, with all of these things, the left, in some circles, in some instances, has an aversion to governing power as you're governing over somebody else. I understand the aversion to power. I understand the space where power can corrupt in systems that allow it to. However, to make the structural changes, the actual things that we want to see happen, we need people in positions of power, positions of governing, obviously elected through us, supported by us, but in those spaces so that they can make those changes. One thing I note every single time here is this isn't just the end all be all in terms of how to make change. I'm not saying this is the only way to do things. I'm saying this is our North Star as WFP, as a political party. These are the things that really guide us here. There are, of course, a million of other ways that you can make change. There's different goals, different things that you can do to address specific issues. But as our North Star, as a political party, that's one of the main goals. And I really want to emphasize that for folks so they don't think I'm saying this is the only way you need to and can do something. This does not include everything else. Hope that makes sense for folks. Again, if folks have questions about anything, if I'm talking too fast, if I'm using acronyms or anything that does not make sense to you or it's really jargon heavy, let me know in the chat. I am always happy to help elaborate these things. And welcome, Addie. Hope the soup goes well. Really, WFP and the North Star came out of how we see as some of the main issues here in the US. I'm going to let all of these show up at once and then go through them bit by bit. We see the authoritarian white nationalist takeover of the GOP. We have known for a long time that they've been cozy with one another and has shown up in different ways, through dog whistles, through just a lot of how they deal with economic things. The white nationalist forces are more broadly and more outwardly taking control of the GOP. GOP, of course, is referring to the Republicans, if you're not familiar with that terminology. At the same time, while these authoritarians or white nationalist authoritarians are taking over the GOP, the Democratic Party is being controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. So one group is taking over one party, another group is taking over the other. Democrats, because of this, the latter here, Democrats are losing working class people of all races. For a couple decades, for like a decade especially during the Obama term, there was always this talk of, oh, Democrats are losing the white working class vote. They're losing all of these people in the Midwest, in different parts of the country. However, we're seeing that working class individuals, working class voters, regardless of voters or not, but just individuals in general, are choosing to distance themselves from a Democratic Party that is, they can see, controlled by wealthy and corporate forces. And all of this leads to a two-party system that limits our room to maneuver, to make change, to enable folks to get into office without having to align themselves directly and only with one of these two parties. So the authoritarian white national takeover GOP, this is good in terms of the context of it. I don't think I need to explain too much what it is that this, how this shows up. I mean, you look at the news every day, it seems, every hour, and you can see different instances of this play out. And basically, it's moving the party of Trump and Trump aligned folks, and it's becoming just explicitly the party of white nationalism. The Republican Party, for what it used to allegedly stand for on paper back in the day, is changing to what they explicitly are calling and aligning with white nationalism and Christian theocracy. It obviously and clearly poses a present danger to individuals across the country, and regardless of what state you're in, especially here in California, where we have the luxury at times of being fully democratically controlled. But we know that these forces don't just exist on a federal level, they exist on smaller levels at school boards, city councils, municipalities just across the state, especially in the Central Valley and some areas in SoCal. So what this looks like, and I don't want to go and talk about this for too long, but you see the attacks on wokeness, because they can never clearly define what it means. That's just their latest term for people that are not like them. Open attacks on democracy. This has been an ongoing trend for a while. Violence against hosting drag shows, whether at bars or at libraries, schools, anything. And then passing laws and using their power in the legislature, regardless of where they are, to erase entire groups of people. This clearly shows up in different places, especially in California, to different degrees. The Bay Area deals with this in a different form than an area like Bakersfield, for example. And I just use Bakersfield as an example because Central Valley deals with this a lot more. So at the same time, we run into the other side of the coin of a political party, of the Democratic Party being controlled by corporate and wealthy forces. The Democratic Party, again, they are good at explaining and defending the basic rights of individuals. They're like, okay, we know it is wrong to mistreat folks, for the most part, based on a number of factors, whether age, race, gender, sexuality. They're good at defending basic rights. However, this doesn't extend to economic rights, and most of the time they are normalizing the status quo, and the status quo being an economic system and an electoral system that heavily favors the rich and the well-connected, who then in turn lobby and fund the campaigns of these Democrats, continuing this vicious cycle of a party snowballing more and more towards wealthy and corporate forces. Why is this a problem? I think if you are here in this space, you are aware of why this is a problem. We see this showing up as voters feeling disillusioned with the two-party system, with folks having a distrust for just general politics in general as they equate governance with the work of political parties. So it really shows up in a plethora of ways, and we'll talk about how we are working to combat this kind of narrative, this kind of idea that governance has to just be like that. So I'll elaborate that in a second here. But two-party system, I think folks are familiar with all of these 3 points of what it is that the two-party system really encapsulates. It's the spoiler problem, like, oh, a third party candidate could be a spoiler to a Democrat losing an election to a conservative or a Republican. Strategic voting, which ends up being, oh, I have to suffer for the better of two evils. That kind of narrative is very prevalent right now. But that is a symptom and a response to our two-party system, which limits our ability to choose who best aligns with our values because we only have two choices. So you have to like strategize of like, okay, I'm going to vote for this person because they are not as bad as this person, even though this whole thing is a mess. And it really makes it prioritize for campaigns and how they approach things, the prioritization of swing voters who flip-flop. So the typical Obama voter who's in the Trump voter, who then was a Biden voter, then might flip back to a Trump voter. The individuals who, for whatever reason, aren't nailed down to a specific party or ideology, they just kind of go where the wind goes. And these swing voters, or folks that have outdo influence on the electoral system, really don't reflect working class folks across the board. So it forces campaigns, it forces candidates running to prioritize those individuals and not the majority of folks whose values need to be represented. So again, these are the big four. The big thing, and what we see here in California a lot, is this bottom left one, which is the Democrats losing working class people of all races. This is a graph that I found, I don't even remember what it was now, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago maybe. And this really goes to show what I'm talking about here in terms of the Democrats losing working class individuals and the rich going more towards the Democratic Party because they know they can have a stronger influence in that space. Not that the Republican Party doesn't do that, but this really shows over time. Here you see 1960 all the way through where we are now, the gap widening between the poorest third and the richest third flip, like very stark difference. But then come around mid 90s onward, it starts to shift and pivot where it kind of stagnated a bit in terms of Democratic support for within the poorest third of Americans, but then sharp change, and we're almost to the point where it is going to inverse. And these are always like, graphs are one thing, and I try to not show graphs too much because it's hard to like lose the importance of these things. The big thing is these are millions of individuals. This is like the poorest third, middle third, richest third. That's over 100 million per group here. So it's a very big change that we're seeing happening. And even the middle third is starting to deviate away from the Democratic Party more towards Republicans. So this is the circumstances and the situation we are finding ourselves in now. It is difficult to, it's not like an overnight change. Like everyone's going to like wake up and like, oh, damn, I want to go back to Democrat. This is after decades of change, decades of being ignored, decades of different messaging that has led us to this point. But going back to what we are as a party, this is typically what folks think of a political party. However, how we define a political party is slightly different. We define it based off of these four pieces here. One being, it involves people organizing together, specifically to do elections around a platform and governed by a clear ideology. So it doesn't necessarily explicitly say anything about, oh, ballot access, or this many candidates need to exist with WFP on their tagline. It is broader than that, but it really encompasses and does what a political party is meant to do. So I think it's important when folks think of WFP, they think of it like this. They don't think of it as like, oh, I have to split my allegiance between WFP and my other political party. you can be a part of both. It doesn't have to be like one or the other, but you can obviously always choose which most align with what it is that you are interested in and want to focus on. I believe last time I said I was going to try to find a recording of our executive director, Maurice Mitchell, saying this instead of me having to read it out, because I could never do it justice reading it like how he presents things. But I will read it aloud here for folks. This is basically his words that really echo what we were talking about with our North Star. So in order to build the world we need, we have to dismantle racism and sexism. We need to build an economy that puts people and the planet ahead of profits. To accomplish any of this, we need a political revolution that will transform our government by taking power from the billionaires and warmongers and putting it in the hands of the majority of Americans. Again, it's just a rephrasing his own flair on top of like what we defined already as a North Star, but it goes into like a greater detail of like, okay, these are who explicitly the quote unquote enemy or opposition are. It's billionaires and warmongers. We know what we need to specifically focus on: an economy that puts people and the planet ahead of profits. So the reason I always like to include this is because this is obviously there's a lot going on here, but it's easy for folks to understand what the point is. It's not heavy jargon. It's not terms that folks are unfamiliar with. It says, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we need to do. This is who we need to get this power from. And so I always like sharing it. It is great. I promise I will find at some point a recording of him saying this. If not, I will find him and make him record this when he comes to our convention later this month. But focusing more now on California. California is a special thing. I mean, I could go into the history of California. I was a history major. I enjoy talking about these things. So there's a lot of things here that I could talk about in terms of how California exists politically. But this is the main thing I really want to emphasize here. That while we may appear blue, and by blue, folks typically just think about it on paper, how many Democrats are registered in California, or how the presidential election always goes. It'll be blue no matter what. However, that doesn't always translate down ballot. It doesn't translate to things where we focus on cities or counties or anything that is below a presidential or a major ticket like the Senate seat ticket. In the same election of Biden's 2020 victory here in California, there was also Prop 15, which was a statewide rent control ballot. It was supported by a lot of progressive organizations or Democratic groups, but this is the same map with the different coloring showing up here. You see that red was no against this, blue was yes. The areas that folks typically think of, oh, always blue, Bay Area, some of the coastal areas, they stayed blue, but the majority of the state that was formerly blue for Biden didn't translate the same way. And this is the issue, and this is the problem that we are running up against here in California. It's not that, oh, we are short Democrats. We are short Democrats voting. We are short progressive individuals voting. I don't want to equate Democrat with just progressive, because there are folks, obviously, no party preference or independents who are plenty progressive. So figuring out how to manage this is not something that I can explicitly say, this is how you do it, X, Y, and Z, give us 10 years, problem solved. But this is what we're seeing as the issue moving forward. And so because we are an absolutely massive state, this is what we decided to like. So one thing about WFP, I am staff. I am senior statewide organizer with California WFP. However, I am not, nor do any of the other staff, sit on the governing body of California WFP. The governing body of California WFP is comprised of these three pillars, which make up our steering committee. And these are the statewide labor unions, these are statewide community C4s, and these are members and individuals from the regional charters. What that looks like is we have 7 regional charters here in California. We are a massive state, so it would not make sense to have just one regional body making decisions for all of California. There's a lot of nuance that comes and experience on the local level, and so this is how we decided to break up California to better manage all of these things. So the 7 regions are the Bay Area, Central Coast, Central Valley, LA County, Orange County, the Inland Empire, and San Diego. Typically, the areas that folks think of when they think of California, we just made them for the regions. And then on each of these regional charters, we had 3 pillars again for each of these. So all of these regions have their own labor unions, community C4s, and individual members. So the dues-paying members who exist within California WFP, they are represented by a member rep who they elect that sits on this regional steering committee. Again, staff, we don't. We help facilitate these conversations. We help organize folks so that they can have these meetings, give them space, etc. But as staff, we do not sit on these regional charters or the regional steering committees, which is something that I think folks kind of get confused about because they see us as the staff as sometimes the face of WFP when it's a lot more than just myself or the other organizers or the other managers. So really, this is, and I think this is the most updated version, but these are the list of all the organizations that exist both on the statewide organization level, so folks that represented on our statewide steering committee, and then on the regional levels, we are made up of all of these groups who each send their own representative to engage through WFP on a whole bunch of things, whether it's ballot measures, whether it's endorsements, whether it's just other political action. All of these groups come together to work on stuff within their region, and then sometimes we also have everybody come together to work on larger things that the state needs to tackle. So I'm not going to leave that one up for too long, but that's one of the big things that I always like to emphasize. We are more than just the staff. We are made up of a bunch of these organizations. Our chair is Christina Livingston from ACE. She is fantastic, but she is the chair of WFP here in California. So despite staff having a role in all these things, other folks play a super vital role in the governance of us. This is the general strategic directions that we saw as important for California this year. This is an election year, so this gives us the opportunity to get more folks into office that better represent the values of the working class. So I'll explain what the squad is in a second here, but the squad is basically kind of mirrored and copied from the congressional squad that exists, where we have a bunch of folks in the state legislature that we think best represent working families' values. We want to expand the existing squad members with new ones that decide and made it through the primary and also win in November. So we can pass legislation like CalCare or universal single-payer healthcare, or things around the Green New Deal, or better rent control measures, or a tax on the ultra-rich. A lot of things that require more votes than we currently have in the legislature, because there are moderate and corporate Dems currently stonewalling any of that progress there. The next thing, too, is just because we wanted to focus on the statewide level of stuff doesn't mean we want to also just ignore everything else. A big piece of what we want to focus on, and the reason that we're doing campaign camps, is to really focus on a pipeline of folks wanting to run for municipal office or a school board, a board of supervisors, or water district. I don't care what district you want to run for. If you are working families party aligned and are interested in doing that stuff, there's always space for you here. So we really wanted to help train up not only the candidates who are thinking of running, whether this cycle or next cycle or in a few years, but also their staffers, their campaign managers, their field directors, anyone who's interested in helping out win these races. We also wanted to train them up because it takes more than just a progressive candidate to win. So really making sure that they are supported at any level and every level is really important for us. And then another piece, and this has kind of shifted as we really look at the layout of the candidates, but taking back a couple of the swing seats that are available and that WFP wants to get behind, and then more importantly, expand progressives in Congress so that they could hopefully join the official congressional squad when they make it into office post-November. This is probably one of the so I saw a question in the chat real quick. C4s are groups that are nonprofit organizations, and Maddie, you're doing a fantastic job answering them. 501c3s are not allowed to be political, and which makes them tax exempt. But the C4s are the groups that can, in limited ability and scope, engage within political process, whether via lobbying or campaigns. More often, they are just directly, actively have a close relationship with campaigns and everything. They're able to do so, but they are not tax deductible donations to them. So it's an interesting space where 501c3s, without getting into a whole thing, but it's a good thing to mention, any group that is interested in joining WFP as an existing 501c4 or community group, they can join the regional steering committees if they want to. If they want to have that conversation, we're more than happy to facilitate those things, because we know it's not just us working on these issues, there's a bunch of other groups. And so 501c3s typically are looking to more have C4 arms that are able to still focus on the work they're doing, but directly engage in the campaign and political process to make change however they see fit. But yes, none of us are lawyers. But that's just stuff that you run into from interacting in this space. This and the next slide are two of the craziest, I think, to look at. They don't look the nicest, but it is really hard to condense all of this information into one single slide and not have the whole story arc, comic book, very basically, of explaining all of these different things over multiple pages. But essentially, as I mentioned before, the state legislature can pass a lot of things. The state legislature passes hundreds of more bills than Congress ever does on a year-to-year basis. We pass so many more bills that it's kind of crazy to keep up with everything, but it allows us as California to be at the forefront of a lot of legislation that then bleeds into other states, or we get the ball rolling on these things that are super progressive. But that's only when things are able to clear the hurdles that exist within the legislature. So listed here are the current breakout of what the legislature is. The assembly here is basically the House of Representatives equivalent here in California. There are 80 total seats. There are currently 62 Democrats, which is a supermajority, so anything that needs to pass can immediately pass if all Dems just hop on board with it. 53 of those would need for a 2/3 supermajority, and but 41 are needed for a majority. There are 24 broadly defined progressives. Of those, the purple ones in the names there are the folks that we have endorsed as WFP. Greens are the ones that are an open seat this year, and then the ones in black are just, again, generally defined as progressive. So 24 progressive, 10 liberal, 28 corporate Dems, and then the 18 Republicans on the other side of this. So 24 and 10, just simple math, that just gets us to 34. We need 41 votes for a majority. Legislation that involves taxes here in California require 2/3 supermajority. So not only are we behind on getting legislation for a majority, we are behind in terms of getting larger things passed. And that is not to mention that the current speaker and the Governor Gavin Newsom, are more in the neoliberal / kind of liberal, depending on the issue, camp of things. So even if things do pass, they would end up having to get signed by the governor, and he has vetoed things plenty of times. But this goes to show you that while we have a sizable chunk of individuals who are 24 progressives, and if you can count on all 10 liberals, we still need to chip away at the corporate Dems who still wield an absurd amount of power in the legislature. Because each of their votes, we still would need 7 votes from the folks in the corporate Dems, or even Republicans, if the stars aligned for that, to pass legislation just with a simple majority. So there's a lot going on there that allow us to know who to target, know which races to focus on, which candidates need support to not only keep a progressive seat, but possibly and hopefully flip one of the corporate Dem seats in this upcoming cycle. The other thing, and this is the Senate version of this, this is essentially the Senate side. It is less nice to look at because the progressives are even smaller group. This really limits the ability for progressive legislation to get out of the Senate and then also make it through the Senate. So for those of you who are a bit unfamiliar with all of how the process works, the Assembly and Senate both are responsible for getting their own bills passed. Once it passes the Senate or the Assembly, it flips over to the other side. So what starts in the Senate needs to also pass through the Assembly. What starts in the Assembly also needs to pass through the Senate. So in order for a bill to make it all the way out of the legislature, it needs to pass the full Assembly and the full Senate. Only then does it go to the governor, who then can either sign it or veto it, send it back. There's a whole litany of things that he can do there. So not only do we have a hurdle in one branch of the legislature, we have a hurdle in the other side too. And this one is tougher because despite there only being 40 seats and us having 14, the corporate Dems, again, strongly outnumber us in terms of the not only the numbers, but also the chairs in which they have control over. And so a committee chair, this is your California legislative quick policy run through really quickly. So chairs are responsible for what bills get to get heard in their respective committees. So the chair of the environmental committee, anything that has to do with the environment, he because in this case they are all male, he gets to decide if that bill gets heard or not, regardless if it has a lot of support or not. If he's like, nah, I take $100,000 from PG&E, we're not touching this bill whatsoever, the bill's dead. Doesn't matter. The chair says, nope, we're not going to have a hearing on it. Nope, doesn't get a vote. And that's the end of that bill. Nothing can happen with it whatsoever. And let's say it passed through the Assembly and makes it over to the Senate. If it has to go through one of these committees again, the chair could be like, you know what? I don't like this. It's going to die here in this committee. Obviously, they would not say it with that explicit language and be that transparent with it, but they would say, oh, this could have terrible effects for Californians because blah, 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 when in really they've just been lobbied heavily by one of these special interests. So it makes it difficult to pass legislation while these chairs currently exist. To your question of where in the state do most of the corporate Dems serve, I wish there was the nicer answer other than they serve everywhere. you have, and I won't name names explicitly here, but you have two neighboring, whether an assembly or senate, you have two neighboring districts where you can have a super progressive, so like assembly member Ash Kalra and Alex Lee, who share district borders. And then right next to them, you have someone like Evan Lowe, who is known to be very corporate friendly. So that exists in the Bay Area. Again, they're directly neighbors. And then there's other parts of the area, like in LA, for example, where you have super strong progressive champions in the legislature. But then next to them, despite also being in a working class heavily area, you have corporate Dems also retaining seats in the Assembly and Senate. And unfortunately, they kind of are everywhere. There are areas, though, and this is something I like to always tell folks, like, oh, it's not all doom and gloom. One of the benefits, though, is there are currently corporate Dems who are in seats, but the voters in their district are a lot more progressive than they are. And it can be, a lot of things can be said about, oh, how do they keep electing this individual, incumbent advantage, all those things. But it means there's an opportunity, whether to have an insurgent campaign or take it during an open seat, where a progressive can flip some of these seats without doing the super extra hard work of flipping an entire voter base. All they have to do is reach all the right voters and ensure that they go vote. Obviously, that is a very simplified version of the issue, but it allows us to know which areas, which seats we can focus on moving forward. I hope that makes sense. I wish I had a better answer of like, oh, they're all located in this zip code. Let's all focus there. They're split up across the state, unfortunately. And as I mentioned before, in terms of growing our squad, and this one doesn't include one of the latest endorsements we have, but we have these current 10 folks here on the left. 10? That's 10. Senator Aisha Waham, Senator Carolyn Menjivar, Senator Lola Smolo Cuevas, Senator/Assemblywoman Eloise Reyes Gomez, Assemblywoman Liz Ortega, Assemblymember Alex Lee, Ash Kalra, Isaac Bryan, Corey Jackson, and then Assemblywoman Tina McKinnon. Hopefully to join them after November, we have we have two more in addition to this. We have Sasha Renee Perez running for Senate in LA, also Sade Hawari running in LA, and then in the Bay Area, we have also in LA, we have John Yee running for Assembly, and then in the Bay Area, we have Marisol Rubio running for State Senate. So in addition to these two individuals who made it through the primary, there are two others who will hopefully make it through November and join our growing list of folks in the squad. But as again, our squad is smaller in terms of the actual progressives, so there's a lot more work that can be done to expand this, but these are some of the things that we are looking forward to come November in returns to focusing on growing out the squad. This isn't going to be just everybody. There will be more folks as we continue through the endorsements that we might add to this that have made it through the primary, but I'll be sure to update that come June if we get all those endorsements done by then. But not everything is just focused explicitly on campaign season. This is one of the things that we are running into as we see the playbook change for reactionaries and conservatives across the state. Fighting against recalls here in California, the whole system has been heavily weaponized to the point where it's becoming a playbook of, okay, we don't like this person 5 days into their term, we're going to launch a recall against them. This latest example here is with one of our first actually endorsed folks as California WFP, Jessie Lopez in the city of Santa Ana. She ran in 2020, she got elected, and then as she stood her ground, on the council, as she kind of didn't kowtow to the police union that was really heavily trying to force her to line up with what they were pushing. The police union was like, all right, cool, we're going to recall you then. And so they were able to get the recall on the ballot. It came down to a special election where nothing else was on the ballot. This was literally just a recall vote for a city council in the city of Santana in Orange County. Nothing else was on the ballot. And so it took us, it took the campaign, it took union organizations, it took a bunch of C4s, shout out to Chispa and OC Action down in Orange County, who helped beat back this recall. Ultimately, we were able to win and stop this recall, but that hasn't stopped folks from trying to push recalls everywhere across the state. And obviously, the big one was the attempted recall of Governor Gavin Newsom. Other prominent ones were the recall of Chesa Boudin or the San Francisco school board members. But we are seeing this playbook show up not just with the really popularized ones, but then on city councils and school boards up and down the state. So it is something that we are actively fighting back against. And in order to make some of these changes, stuff needs to pass in the state legislature. So it's not just a local issue that we're fighting, but things in the legislature that we can hopefully change the rules where it's not just a vocal minority trying to get folks out of office. Another thing is we like and understand that it should not all just be work. We do have town halls with some of our elected officials once they get into office, so we can help amplify the stuff that they're working on, things that they really want to get in front of voters or folks in their district. So we've had town halls with Fu Zhang in Merced, Lissette Espinoza Garnica, who is the vice mayor of Redwood City, Peter Ortiz. I'm sure there are a bunch more that I'm blanking on off the top of my head, but we like to support our candidates. We like to support our elected officials after they get elected, because we know that having a sense of community with the folks in your district really helps to mitigate all the sometimes misinformation and just crazy talking points that get thrown around regarding some of our progressive champions. And then at the same time, we also like to focus on the socials. Currently, San Diego has a kickoff this evening. They are still going on right now. I think they started at 5:30. Don't know what time they'll end. But San Diego has a kickoff right now. We are hoping to do one soon in San Mateo. I'm trying to get a trivia night set up in San Jose. LA, I think, does trivia nights every month. I could be wrong if they're doing one this month or not, but they've been doing it for like the last 2 months. They'll have an LA trivia night with just a bunch of folks and go out and play trivia. So if that's interesting for you, I would go check that out. If you sign up for this event on Mobilize, you can check out Mobilize and anything there at the same time. I'm hoping my thing still works. Cool. So in the chat, I also was able to drop the link for our upcoming events on Mobilize. So anything that we have coming up, you can find there. Anything event-wise that we have going on will always be on our Mobilize page. One of the other things that I am excited to be able to kick off in 2 weeks from this evening is that with all the ongoing protests, with all the ongoing actions up and down the state, especially on the college campuses, I reached out to the National Lawyers Guild, specifically the folks in SF, to help do a legal observer training. So this is for folks, I don't know if you've attended a protest or seen them in photos. They're the ones with the nice neon colored hats, and they are legal observers to help ensure the rights of protesters, activists, whoever's on the ground, and that they're being treated fairly, that they are being respected in their civil rights. They document all of these things. So I thought it was a good opportunity to get this in front of folks. If this is an avenue folks want to do, this again should be on our Mobilize. This will be 2 weeks from today, 2 Mondays from today on the 20th, 6 to 7:45 p.m. I don't think we'll be able to do a recording of this one since it's specifically a training that leads to a certification to become a legal observer. But if there's enough interest in this and there's enough people that were not able to make it to this one, I can see if we can also do additional dates as well. But if this is something of interest, again, it is on our Mobilize. Link should be still in the chat. Next thing, as I mentioned about campaign camps, this is the old kickoff flyer that I had, but our first actual virtual sessions for campaign camp start this coming Wednesday. Again, this is for folks who are interested in running for office, thinking about running for office, want to learn more about campaigns, interested in being a staffer. There's a lot of different ways that you can engage with this. So let me make sure I get that link in the chat. But !camp at any time should allow you to get the application. The application is just basically just information about who you are, what seat you might be running for, and your organizations you're affiliated with. But then you'll immediately get the link to sign up for the virtual sessions. We had San Mateo campaign camp and LA campaign camp this past Saturday. Bakersfield campaign camp in person's coming up this coming Saturday, the 11th. And then the following week, on the 18th, we will have our San Jose campaign camp and our Orange County campaign camp in person. So if you're interested in attending at either of those, please mark it on the application, and I'll make sure that you get the link for that as well, in addition to the virtual one, because I'd just like to make sure that this is accessible to everybody. Lastly, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we have our upcoming convention. Let me make sure. I don't know if I still have it set up, but the registration link is still live. If you're interested in coming to our convention, this is again the first ever California WFP convention. National held their own first time last year. California were like, you know what, we can do it too. So May 31st through June 2nd, that is the last weekend of May, we will be having our convention in San Francisco. If you live in the area, it is cheaper for you because you don't have to book any hotel or flight or anything. Hotels covered in hotel, food, childcare services. Everything's on the website. Everything's on the registration page. But any accommodation needs that you might have will be taken care of there. Super great if you can attend. We will hope to have these more often, especially in different places around the state. But very excited that we were going to be having this. Maurice Mitchell's going to be there. Dolores Huerta is going to be there. We have Kendra Nicholas O'Rourke from the Philly City Council going to be joining us as well to talk about how things worked out in Philly for them in terms of being WFP elected individuals on that city council. Last couple of things. These are folks that if you have questions about management stuff or things on like a larger scale, you can reach out to them. Jane Kim, statewide director, Jorge Contreras, senior campaign manager, and now deputy director, Adam Gold, senior federal affairs strategist. And then last but not least, these are all the organizers here in California. You can get in touch with any of us at any point if you are on Discord. If you're on Discord, you can reach out to us. If you want, you can also set up meetings with us via connecting with us on our Linktree. But I am based in the South Bay, but I am the statewide senior organizer with California WFP, so I'm always available to talk regardless of what region or area you are in. But with that, I always like to give time at the end for any additional questions, thoughts, concerns folks have. James, I see your question, so I will get to that just in a second. But also just wanted to open it up to other folks who are interested in anything else, additional questions, concerns, thoughts, want me to elaborate on things. But to James, your question, if you're talking about WFP in general, specifically California WFP, for California WFP, we always are on the line to support union striking workers, ensure that they have everything that they need, so that they can really strike and not have their livelihood in jeopardy. We work on legislation. We work on not just legislation on the statewide level, but to also lobby and support folks in city levels for raising minimum wages. A lot of our electeds and individuals who have been around and ongoing through COVID, hazard pay stuff was definitely a big thing. Making sure folks know their rights too. I mean, broadly speaking to workers, there's getting the information in front of people, making sure that folks know that these are things that they have access to as workers, just so that they are not taking advantage of in the workplace. I'm trying to think of everything else right now. But normally WFP, we don't like to take credit for any specific action because we are always working in coalition with members and groups, whether it's SAU for Fight 15 or with CNA and NUHW for stuff with their nurses. We are always working with other groups and organizations, so our accomplishments are shared accomplishments. Do you have to be a dues-paying member to attend the convention events? No, I did not mention it, but that is a good thing to mention now. It is highly encouraged to become a dues-paying member to attend a convention, to attend events. No, you don't. You are able to attend anything else completely for free. Dues-paying membership just allows you to become potentially a member rep, to sit on the regional steering committee. It helps fund the work that we do, and again, recurring dues-paying member just means any recurring donation a month. If you can't do $10 a month, you can do 5. If you can't do 5, you can do 2. If you can't do 2, you can do 1. Anything helps and goes a long way, honestly. You'd be surprised how much $10 can actually go when a lot of folks contribute that stuff, especially when we are working to elect folks and support people up and down the state. But for convention, it is highly encouraged to become a dues-paying member or continue being a dues-paying member. But for any other events, you do not have to be. So anything that you see on any of the events, whether it's the trainings, whether it's campaign camp, you are free to do so. Other questions people might have? And thank you for folks who joined in. Lots of, a decent amount of new names that I haven't seen joining before. So thank you for joining us this evening. Last thing I will say is Discord. If you are interested, we have, if it works, yep. Discord is, if you know what Slack is, Discord is basically just a cooler version of Slack. Discord is a place where we just gather and talk online about a bunch of different things. We have different ongoing events there. So tomorrow, actually, we have our talk with Jane Kim, who is our statewide director, on Discord itself at noon. We have a game night coming up on Thursday. I forget what time I set it for, but I think it's sometime in the evening. Again, just a great place to get to know other activists, us as staff, talk about whatever, share things, signal boost stuff. I always encourage folks to do that, even if you don't check it regularly. It'll always be a space to have any of the upcoming information that we have just in one central space, and you can reach out to staff and all of the organizers and myself and management at any point about things that you have questions on, suggestions. So it's a great place for that. If folks have no other questions, thank you for joining us this evening. I hope everyone is doing well. Hope to see you at some of the many events that we have going on the next month, next couple of weeks. I will stick around for another minute or two, just in case folks have any lingering questions or thoughts. Always happy to answer those. But for the rest of you who have joined and stayed for this time, thank you. Again, hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening. Bye-bye, folks. And again, I'll stick around for like another minute or two in case folks have additional things. Is there a local group near Sacramento? Yes, we are working to build out a Sacramento WFP. I would connect with Neil. Kiki Snail, I'm glad you learned a lot. Thank you for joining. Let me drop James. I dropped Neil's email in the chat so you can connect with Neil. Neil is the senior organizer for the Central Valley, and he's been working to build out the stuff in Sacramento. I know there's a couple other folks who are interested in getting things going up there. So, and the other thing too is that we're focusing heavily and really working to support Dr. Flo up there in the mayoral race. Really hope that she wins, and was excited about her victory in the primary. So we definitely hope to build out Sacramento a lot more. Yes, I will make sure to bug Hannah about the upcoming events in LA, especially the trivia nights. I know the folks have been enjoying those a lot. Again, if folks have any remaining questions, you can feel free to reach out to me via email, via text, if you have my number, or just on Discord. With that, then, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful night. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.